Welcome to another episode of the Cybertron City Podcast, New York City's premier Transformers fan cast, where we celebrate all eras of Transformers except Kiss players. My name's Paul, aka Brooklyn Bots, over on Instagram. As always, I am joined by my regular co-host, Danny, aka Matrix_Neds23, over on Instagram. Danny, how you doing tonight?
Doing all right. I'm very excited to talk about the topic for today. I know it's still pretty hot. Just happened this week, so I'm ready to get into it.
Still red hot. And of course, today's topic is going to be the Transformers 1 discussion. We're not going to do anything else except talk about that. So if you haven't seen the film, we're going to be posting this on Friday very, very soon after we record it, which is a little unusual for us, but we know this movie's hot. This movie's great. We finally have a Transformers film that's in the 90s on Rotten Tomatoes, which is like, pinch me, I must be dreaming. Like, Michael Bay's still kind of sort of in the producer's chair, because I think Bayhem Films is like the technical, like, in-house studio or whatever that's producing it. Whatever, that's technical stuff. We don't really care. The point is, we are having a great Transformers film for the first time in, since 2007, honestly. So if you haven't seen this film, this is a spoiler-filled review. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not going to do like a little funsy thing without spoilers. This review will have lots and lots and lots of spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled and you haven't seen already, we'll see you next week. If you have, catch me and Danny talking about this right now. So,
Yep.
Danny, when did you see Transformers 1?
I saw this on the 14th. I believe that was 2 Saturdays ago. It was for like one of those like fan screening events. Me and my girlfriend went to go watch it together. And I mean, it was pretty good. We had a pretty decently sized packed theater. There was like at least like 20, 25 people in there. People cheered, people laughed, and it's always nice to be in a theater where it's not dead. I know a lot of people don't care for like being in a loud theater, but I mean, it kind of like makes it a bit more real and more enjoyable for me. I watched it 2 weeks ago and I just kind of had to stay quiet about it. Didn't want to post anything on Instagram, but I mean, I'm glad everybody got to see it. I'm glad that people in my area at least knew about the early screening, which means there's some hardcore fans out there. And I watched it again this Saturday with my brother, and it was still a pretty decently sized packed theater. A lot of couples, a lot of people getting hype over Starscream, a lot of people in like sweaters and shirts. So like it's good to see the community out there kind of supporting the movie, especially after those live action movies kind of leaving a sour taste in everybody's mouth. I was scared that the animation would kind of deter a lot of fans.
Yeah, that's one thing that surprised me. I was going into this film with about as minimal expectations as possible because I
Hmm.
hated, like, really hated the first trailer. Like, I'm like, what is this play school shit going on in here? Why do these robots look creepy as hell? And I think the one that really threw me off was Alita One's head design. And I'm like, whoa, this doesn't look. It's almost Transformers Prime adjacent, where some of those designs just flat out don't have noses, or if they do,
Yeah.
it's like this little tiny stump thing, which makes sense for a character like Arachnid, which we'll get into a little bit later. It's like, yeah, Arachnid's a Transformers Prime original character. Happy to see her there amongst the flood of other, how many other instances of Starscream, Soundwave, Shockwave, all the
Yep.
big one heavy hitters. How many more of them can we see with them being like, okay, you can't really change the design that much? But seeing a character like Arachnid that Shocker diverted from her original source material was great. Overall for the film, if I was to give it a rating, like solid 9 out of 10. I was
Yeah.
very surprised, and I think going in with no expectations definitely helped. Because if I went in like having my usual laundry list of like what my TF, fan canon, fan ideas, laundry list or whatever, if that was my expectation or my approach going into this, I would have been so much more disappointed.
Yeah, I remember you telling me how like not excited for the movie you were, and at one point you had reached the like I'm not gonna watch it at all. I'm just gonna wait for it to hit streaming type of like phase of Transformers One hype.
Yeah. I'm very happy to say I was wrong. So on when I saw it on opening night, I saw it in IMAX in I think it was AMC 14 on 34th Street in Manhattan, and it was pretty dead. Like I was the first person in the theater. They were just clearing out the 5 p.m. show, and I saw it at 7:30. And I had my Optimus Prime poster and keychain in hand, which was a great little goodie that I got. Wasn't necessary, but I'm happy I got something. And it was pretty dead. There was like a few fans that were in there. There may have been like a couple of families with small kids, but it was mostly like teenagers, 20 somethings, 30 somethings, and a couple of, I wouldn't say G1ers. They were a little young for that, but definitely like good 10, 15 years on me. And I'm 31
Okay.
years old. So like these are definitely people that may have grown up with like G1 and syndication or whatever.
Mm.
And I remember walking out of the theater, and there was one of these older fans that like turned to me. He's like, "Wow, that surprisingly didn't suck." And him and I both like laughed at that. And it's fair. Um, all the other Transformers films, I posted a little story on this on Instagram too. The way that I organize the Transformers films now are into three tiers. I don't have a specific ranking like 1 to 9 or
Okay.
1 to 9 or whatever. But I do. I think at this point I can put the good Transformers films as being TF 2007,
All right.
Transformers One, and Bumblebee. The
Okay.
okay ones would be the '86 movie. Yes, I call the '86 movie okay. Come at me.
It
I'll
is.
explain this
It is.
later.
It is
It is
okay.
okay.
It's a fun watch, but it's okay.
Yeah, if it's mostly just nostalgia. And like I said, there's a few
Yes.
like really solid scenes that individually, if you clip it, are great. But after
Hmm.
Galvatron kills Starscream, the movie's an incoherent mess. It really is.
It won't
But no,
fly
like
by today.
yeah. Anyway, back to what I was saying. As far as like categorizing them in tiers, the good Transformers movies are TF 2007, Transformers One, and Bumblebee. The okay ones are the '86 movie, Rise of the Beast,
Okay.
and Dark of the Moon. And then
Okay.
the crap ones are Revenge of the Fallen, Age of Extinction, and like bottom of the barrel. Not only the worst Transformers movie, but one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life is Transformers: The Last Night. Just such a we've talked about this so many times, but I don't think you can quite scratch the surface on just how atrocious The Last Night is. Like it makes no sense. If you went into that movie tripping balls, you would have missed nothing.
Yeah, it's such a snooze fest. I find myself just like falling asleep by the time they're in London. I don't care.
Yeah. Like after Anthony Hopkins is like introduced, it's like, oh, Optimus is barely in this. Is this even a Transformers movie? Is this even a Bumblebee movie? No, it's just like Mark Wahlberg getting jacked and having this like hot English chick around with her. Anyway, getting back to Transformers One, the thing that really stuck out to me is just how well the dynamic between Orion and D16 was. Like they weren't kidding about this being like a full like friendship movie. And yeah, Bumblebee was there. I thought Bumblebee was very annoying. I That's probably the number one like major flaw with the movie that I had.
Hmm.
Just Keegan Michael Key played himself like he is in every single adaptation or stand-up thing or comedy skit that he's ever in. He has one role, one dimension. That's it. But the playoff between Chris Hemsworth and Brian Tyree Henry as Orion Pax and D16 respectively was very good. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I didn't buy it the first viewing, but on the second viewing, on the first one, I was excited. I'm trying to pay attention to I'm trying to tear this movie up as I'm watching it. But the second viewing that I got to focus more on the story and more, I mean, not saying that I was just brain dead the first time, but the second time when I got to pay attention to the dialogue, the relationships a bit more, the chemistry a bit more, I did feel it just a bit more. It was hard to buy into the whole D16 Megatron character when he was voiced by the actor that voiced them. I think out of all four of them, out of the four main characters being Pax, Alita, B, and D16, he's the one that I feel really detached from until he becomes like Megatron. It's like, okay, Now I could kind of buy into, this is Megatron. He has a deeper voice. He's more disgruntled. He's more annoyed. He's angry. And I feel like anybody could really do that. Just, I really did miss the Frank Welker Megatron more than I did the Peter Cullen Optimus, only because you kind of forget that it's Chris Hemsworth who's voicing him, at least for me.
I really like this portrayal of like, again, it's different than the usual like Gladiator IDW
Mm-hmm.
inspired Megatron that I really love, like the slow, grinding, oppressive stilt into madness. Versus with this one, like D16 was very content with his role as a miner, doing his thing, staying on protocol,
Mm-hmm.
and even though I think, again, we're talking about the constraints of a 2 hour movie that's made for kids as opposed to
Yeah,
a
of
more mature
course.
IDW kind of like long drawn out comic book. But within the constraints of the film, I liked how once they were with Alpha Trion, like D16 just snapped. Like seeing his hero, Megatronus, getting all fungus and plant stuff growing all over him, having his like little trading card decal or whatever, just like finally on him, and he's like, he really does snap. Once
Yeah,
he finds out that Sentinel is really the one behind everything, he breaks and he totally changes, and I like that. To me, like that was very satisfying seeing him kind of like on this bloodlust warpath, and for the man that didn't want to be plucked from his little universe, and he was all safe and all very like coddled and whatnot, to suddenly realizing everything that he had known love was built on a lie. I feel that's very politically relevant right now. Um, it was great. I kind of, again, I wish it was drawn out over a trilogy so we could have seen like Megatron probably come in sometime around the second movie just to make it a little bit more believable. But because the whole film was the idea of going from that friendship into the beginnings of what the Autobots and Decepticons were, all things considered, I thought it was really well done. But Chris Hemsworth as Optimus Prime, enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to.
mm-hmm.
I would be very happy to see him return. I know he's having some sort of talks for being a live action G.I. Joe person in the next like Rise of the Beast sequel, G.I. Joe crossover or whatever. But as Optimus Prime, if Peter Cullen's not able to do it one day, I think Chris Hemsworth would be a good successor to that role. I thought he did the best he probably could have to bring like the gravitas and weight to his character.
Yeah, after a while, I mean, like I said, I kind of forgot it was Chris Hemsworth, and I was just like, oh, okay, this is just a young Optimus. He's
Yeah,
supposed to sound like this. This is okay. Like the G1er in me was like, this is okay. Like it's fine. Like it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I just kept reminding myself throughout the whole movie. This is a young Optimus. He's not. Maybe he's like in his 20s. It's okay. He's not 60. He's not 50. All right. He's good. We're good. We like this.
he's not 2,000 years old.
Yeah. He's not. He's not. What is it? Is it 9 million? 10 million?
I don't know
It's
because that's
it's said here and there. Yeah. It's always foggy. He's millions of years old. He's not millions of years old. He's in his 20s. It's okay.
yeah. And that's another thing I like about this film. Like, this is unlike the live action universe where you can have this endless debate of is it a reboot? Is it not a reboot? Because the styles are very similar, but they're not in some ways. But the plot deviates, but the plot's always been a mess anyway. This
Mm-hmm.
clearly looks like it's a start for something fresh. Like, the aesthetic
Yeah.
is too different, the tone is too different. The robot modes look nothing like they do in the Michael Bay films. And I'm okay with this being a truly separate like animated movie universe, and if that's the springboard they're going to use to make future films or a trilogy or whatever, I'm more than happy with it. I know Lorenzo has no idea what he's doing. He's kind of the joke of the franchise at this point. I like the live action films, but I think they need to be kept separate. Again, I like most of the live action films, but
Yeah.
they need to be kept separate from this thing because I think they're only going to dig themselves further into a jumbled confusion mess.
Yeah, trying to tie everything together is not working out. It hasn't been
No,
working out since Bumblebee. We should just drop it. It's about to be 10 years now at this point.
not quite. It's what, six
We're
years
like,
since Bumblebee,
we're, Bumblebee was what, 2018? 6 years? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know why. I thought it was 2017. I always mix up those years.
and on today's
But,
episode of Danny Can't Do Math.
but, I don't know if you saw my story. I just posted about an hour ago where like uh, Lorenzo was saying, well, he was trying to tie TF1 into the entire continuity of the Bayverse and the Rise of the
No,
Beast and Rise of,
no,
and the Knightverse. And like, how does that make any sense?
it doesn't.
Explain to me. Explain
It's
Sentinel. Explain Unicron. Explain Alita. Explain anything, please.
no.
Explain something. It does
You
not tie into it.
you can squint to make Bumblebee and Rise of the Beast tying together with the Bay films. You could and ignore the Last Night because I think at this point everyone's going.
Everybody does.
Everyone does, and it's like with like what the Superman movies, the Batman movies, like certain Marvel movies or whatever. Like they do this before with like other comic book movies. They'll like throw other movies out. I think the Halloween movies with Michael Myers, they throw out
Yeah, a couple of them.
reboot. I don't see what the problem would be with Transformers. Just like, hey, those Age of Extinction, The Last Night, they both really sucked, and the Chinese market made those movies were absolutely unwatchable. So we'll throw those out. Just stick with the original two. Like,
Yeah, just take the L.
if you're going to stick with one like horrendous live action Transformers movie, Revenge of the Fallen at least like keeps the thread going, and Dark of the Moon, in my opinion anyway, has like a good payoff for it. But Age of Extinction, as cool as some of those designs are, as much as I like the Dinobots, I'm okay with living without it. The Last Night, ick. But tying that into TF1, I'm the biggest there was no reboot person that you can probably find in the Transformers community. Even I'm
Wait,
like,
really?
yeah, I'm pretty passionate on that there isn't a again, ignoring The Last Night, I'm okay with there being like no reboot. But with TF1, there absolutely is. Like, you just can't argue that. There's
Yeah,
totally
I don't
they're both.
mind this going on as a separate thing from the live action movies. You get the best of both worlds, kind of.
Yeah,
Because I was really sad to even picture not having any live action Transformers movie. Like, that's like my bread and butter. I can't have that. But having TF1 be its own like good thing and having the live action kind of like cater to the older demographic of animations for kids, those types of people, I'm fine. Find whatever reason you want, just keep both of them, please.
but this goes into a larger topic about why I like comic book movies going in the direction of animation, because I feel like it's truer to the medium. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's certain things like if you did something like Dinobot Island, whether it's the G1 version or the animated version, that's not going to translate very well in live action, and it's going to look like campy and stupid. But within an animated
Yeah.
context, it looks really good. Or if you have, I'm deciding animated right now because animated is my favorite, like beginning to end uh, Transformers show. But if you do something like Meltdown or any of the other different like human supervillains, like having that in the context
Yeah.
of the Transformers universe would be stupid. Or Circuit
Of
Breaker
course,
from
there's
one.
different things you could get away with in animation, and I'm all for it too.
Yeah. Versus live action, it's like, sure, you can have the super intricate looking Transformers, just have someone who's a cinematographer that knows what they're doing and doesn't have like the weird Cloverfield shaky camera where someone's having like a seizure as like
Yeah.
Megatron and Prime are doing their thing. And it's like, you can't pay attention. Well, yeah. Um, what else did I really like? I like the callbacks to some of the more obscure characters. Like, who would have known that Darkwing and Arachnid would have had like fairly prominent roles in the film? And like throwing those out as like longtime Transformers fans with those Easter eggs was a great idea. Um,
Yeah.
Darkwing was great. Um, Arachnid, I think, was a good choice as an enforcer. Who else were some pretty sizable cameos and such? I know there was a bunch of like the different recolored Seekers. I saw Red Wing in there at some point. The
There's
Coneheads,
Topspin and Twin Twist.
yeah, the Coneheads looked ridiculous. I'm like, whoa, those heads are gigantic. What the hell?
Yeah.
What that looks like completely and utterly out of place. Great. I like the stylistic choice. Steve Buscemi as Starscream, also a good decision. I think he channeled Chris Latta and some of the other voice actors that portrayed him over the years really well. Um, you know, he
I didn't
sounded
know.
close enough.
Yeah, I didn't know what to expect with him, but I definitely liked him as Starscream and wouldn't mind seeing him again. Live action, animated. Give me a little show. Keep him. I like him too. Him and who was the one who did Siege and that whole trilogy? Was it Frank Tadaro, I believe?
Frank Tadaro was in the Starscream, yeah.
Yeah, I liked him too. So I wouldn't mind if they kind of flip flop back and forth with them. But the voice acting was pretty great. Just just that D16 voice just didn't really hit it for me. But story wise, I know we spoke about having like different aspects of the lore changed without changing the entire franchise or taking a drastic turn.
Mm-hmm.
I They did that with the Matrix, and you know how the Allspark being taken away from the Matrix kind of like drains the planet full of energon. Um, I didn't know how I felt about the Matrix being the reason there was no energon on Cybertron, but it was one of those kind of forgettable moments. Once I left the theater, I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." Like I didn't even realize that that's the reason, you know, this happened in the movie, but it didn't affect the entire story, so I was fine with it.
Yeah, for me, it was a minor nitpick. Like in my head canon, that's what the Allspark is for. It's like it's kind of like depending upon what universe you're looking at. Sometimes it's the Omega Lock, sometimes it's the Allspark, sometimes it's I guess the Matrix of Leadership or Vector Sigma or whatever. But there's always like a key to Primus's life force that keeps the energon flowing. Um, for this continuity, like you said, Matrix of Leadership, I guess, was the reason for that. I would have preferred the Allspark, but just minor nitpicks. But it was good to see like Cybertron was actually dying. They show like the whole sequence in the beginning about like the little prologue of how Cybertron came to be, which I thought was
Exposition
great.
101.
Great exposition. It's not too heavy, but it's just
Yeah.
enough to like illustrate people who are brand new to the franchise. They have no idea what's going on, and the way that it was animated, and they showed like a little like montage instead of just some random voiceover. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Loved it. Um, Speaking of story and whatever, the one major story bit that left me really like, huh? And it just didn't feel complete was the whole Quintesson bit. Like the Quintessons came, we understood that Sentinel was giving them Energon, and then once Megatron snapped and tried to like gain his Decepticons and take revenge on Sentinel, it's like everyone completely forgot about the Quintessons. And I get they'll come back in a future movie, but it's like you're not gonna address that ever again. And they're just saying, "Watch out, Quintessons, don't come back for us." I'm like, I don't know. I felt that whole plot thread was just unsatisfying and unresolved. That's why I give the film
You
like a 9 out of 10 instead of a 10.
got blue balled, is what it is.
We did. What did you think of the Quintesson designs in this film?
I didn't really mind them. Big G Wonder Me obviously wants five faces on a Quintesson and one
Yeah,
Sharkticons, wants everything, wants the whole 9 yards. But seeing that the Quintessons are really just, I mean, I hate to say it, but a kind of a minor villain in like as basic Transformers fans who don't know the lore and or really care to know the lore. I understand why the Quintessons were kind of like a throwaway villain, a side villain, or a side faction. Like you said, I really would have liked to see more expanded on that. I doubt we'll see it in the sequel, and if we do, it'll be like one of those instances where it's like, you should have shown this to us last time we had this movie. Like, why are we building up a whole movie on just a quintessent war at this point? But I like the dynamic and the whole like kind of story that Sentinel had in the relationship with the quintessence. But I did end up feeling I left the theater kind of like, oh yeah, they were in the movie. I forgot they were there.
yeah. I wish I just would have seen more of them. Like you, when it comes to G1 purism, I think the Quintesson look, especially with the Judge, is just so iconic that if you forgo that, people are going to be like, "Really? That's the Quintesson?" It's like having an Optimus Prime design that at some point just doesn't have a faceplate,
Yeah.
or like Megatron that just doesn't have some sort of like cannon, or whether the cannon's on his arm, it comes out of his back, whether it's a dinosaur hand. Like it's just there's certain design cues and such that you would miss, or you would feel like are missing if you don't see them.
Yeah, I would
But
have had a I would have had like a much more negative experience or something more negative to say about it if they were like the big bads of the movie. Like
yeah,
if you're gonna commit to them being your villains, then commit to the design, commit to the lore. But seeing that they were kind of like a side story, part of a side story, and kind of like throwaway villains to advance our plot, the main plot. I mean, I could look past it.
Yeah. I mean, we still have two more movies allegedly in a trilogy of
Mm-hmm.
Lorenzo. You know, again, this is Lorenzo. Take everything he says with a giant, big old handful of salt. But if there's a sequel and then another third movie after that, I'd be more than happy to see the Quintessence return. Maybe we will see judges or a judge at some point. We'll see. But agreed. Like Sentinel was clearly the villain of the movie. I think John Hamm did a great job as being like the
Yep.
conniving, like backstabbing bastard that he actually is. But very, charming, superficial, buddy buddy before, the big revelation comes around. And seeing the Hasbro live stream at PulseCon with the battle mode that Sentinel has with his new Voyager figure from Studio Series, seeing that on the big screen, I'm like, okay. Took a
That
little
was sick.
while. It took a while for that to pay off. I'm like, when is this thing coming? When is this thing coming? And then you finally see it, and you're like, ah. And then just Megatron absolutely just like mercilessly rips the guy in half.
Crazy. I loved Sentinel designs. As a Sentinel's design, I feel like it was probably the best one out of like the main cast, you could say. It just the fact that it brought in so many references and details and kind of ideas from previous Sentinel Primes that we've seen.
Yeah.
Having the blue and yellow gold from animated, having the kind of narcissistic, uh, double-sided politician from the comics to the wings from the third movie to the double-bladed weapon he carries. I mean, like he was almost every Sentinel Prime just combined into one.
He was, and you have Don Draper himself voicing him, and he did a great job. At times, because Josh Cooley, the director, I think he was the director for Toy Story 4. There were a few times I'm like, oh, the camera angles look like it could be a Toy Story movie. Who would have thunk it? But I did like the one of my favorite scenes in the whole film was when they were at the palace, like Starscream. It was called the High Guard, right? Not the Seekers.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
High Guard.
when Starscream, Megatron, the whole High Guard is like at Sentinel's palace or whatever, before the train rams in, just the way that Sentinel mocks everybody and like denies the whole truth and whatnot, that felt very much in line with what I imagined like the core of Sentinel's character to be. Because like at worst, you have someone like animated Sentinel who's not really a like conniving,
Yeah,
planet-wide ruler backstabber, but he's still a dick.
he's just a piece of
Um,
shit.
he is Sentinel. That's Sentinel Prime's role. He's either a traitor, a dick, just really not a good guy that you want to be around. Just always a backstabbing bastard. But
Mm.
in this film, I thought for a PG film, it did a very good job of like walking that line, being a little violent for a PG film, honestly, but still doing a very good job with just capturing how much of a prick Sentinel Prime is. So that very good job with that. What else did I love about the film? Just the overall portrayal of like Cybertronian culture too. Just like really getting immersed in it, making a big deal about racing, how prevalent mining was. Like it's, as I said earlier when I talked about D16, it's a very like controlled kind of ant farm feel. Like it's beautiful. Definitely a like my favorite on-screen portrayal of Cybertron in like a theatrical film ever. Definitely like you could tell that there was a city going on instead of like the weird like hexagon shaped things from the Bay films
Yeah, what the hell was that? It's
or
just
like from the Mike or from the Nightverse, the like War for Cybertron, Fall for Cybertron aesthetic, but like with a darker color gradient, which is also like all right. But no, Cybertron, this is probably one of my favorite portrayals of Cybertron ever. It looked like a planet and a civilization, and there you could distinguish what was going on. It felt like a society instead of like random obstacle course or junkyard like post-apocalyptic wasteland, which was a good change.
mhm. uh talking more about the race. I was very bummed seeing Override or not seeing Override win first place.
Was Override even in that?
Yeah, Override is in it, and I don't think that's like spoilers, even if, I don't know why people will be watching it if they expected no spoilers. But yeah, like even before the movie launched or it was released, that little clip of like the Iacon 5000 went out on YouTube, and Override's name was on the scoreboard.
Yep.
And at first, I thought Mirage had won on my first viewing, but I heard on my second one that it was Chromia who won.
Yep, that's what I heard too. It was Chromia.
So I was like, this, but there were Chromia looking bots at the starting line, and the bot who ended up winning didn't look like the Chromia I had seen at the beginning of the race. I was like, what is happening?
Oh, I wasn't paying attention that much. I'm like, okay, blue feminine like motorcycle adjacent bot. That's Chromia. Okay, cool, whatever. But seeing all the other little cameos in there, like seeing Hound, Sideswipe,
So
Red Alert, Ironhide,
Ratchet.
Jazz. Was Ratchet in there? I barely saw him if he was. I
Yeah,
did see
Ratchet was there.
nice.
Wheeljack was there. I think Lifeline was there at one point. The Paradron medic.
Yes.
Lifeline was there after the race. Twin Twist. What's his brother's name?
Top spin.
Twin Twist. Top Spin. There we go. Top Spin. Twin Twist. And me being me, I was looking for Dion the entire time in the movie, and I'm pretty sure I narrowed it down to two instances where there's a Dion looking bot in the movie. He has the crest and he has the colors on him. He has the orange on the sides, the blue in the middle. Once during the speech Optimus Prime gives when he comes back to the minor kind of like base to kind of like rally them up to join the fight. And the first time I watched the movie, I was just essentially watching the background, just trying to catch every single detail and reference and every character I could find.
Yeah, that's the good thing about that film. There's a lot of like fun little Easter eggs that you can get in there, and I'm happy that they didn't use Nightbird as like the standard female Decepticon. They went into the lore and got someone that was more, as I said before, with Arachnid, someone that's a little bit more obscure that you wouldn't have necessarily seen in more recent media, but they gave her a more like unique spin. I actually like this one, not in terms of the character because I still like the Prime character a lot more. Again, fair more. It's not quite as fair to TF1 because Prime Universe Arachnid had more time to like develop and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like her overall, the vehicle mode especially, where it's that, what was it like a hovercraft
Yeah, it's
thing,
like a hovercopter or something.
hovercraft gunship or whatever, and then like her
Yeah,
robot mode has the option of like flying as well as having the legs. I thought that was very good. It was a good little callback, but also having something new with like her all-seeing eyes being everywhere. It was a good like second in command kind of role that she has.
yeah. Also, a very weird like kind of change of aesthetic between her and Sentinel Prime. That it's like as soon as you see her, you're like something's up. Like, why would this kind of like such a nice Prime in their eyes, like this cool guy, this chill guy who kind of just like laughs about everything. Why would he have this kind of like scary enforcer at his side unless that there's something sinister going on?
Good cop,
Like
bad
that's
cop.
red flags right there, bro. Like what's going on?
Listen behind. I mean, like, you know, Arachnid's his main squeeze. He likes it rough. Um, listen, it's just it was like you said, it was a good contrast between like the conniving asshole that's just no other word for it. The conniving asshole that Sentinel Prime is, and then like you were saying, have like the more straightforward bad cop that Arachnid was. I like those two dualities
Mm-hmm.
together. One other thing that I really liked was like the more, I guess you could say organic, but different idea of like, hey, Cybertron is, it's not this above ground civilization. Like everything's below ground. They've built everything towards the planet core to be closer to Primus. Whereas the outside, I'm not sure if they intended it to be this way, but it's almost like a defense mechanism. Because when they were on the outside, like walking around, they had like these big old stalagmites just like coming out of nowhere, trying to like ward off the surface dwellers or whatever, or the Quintesson ships or whatever. I thought it was kind of cool, like almost like it's like I was saying, like a self-defense mechanism. It's warding off outsiders. It's hostile to anything that doesn't belong on the surface. Having those like deer there that have like the changing color bits in their antlers, that was really cool. Just it was a very different take on Transformers that I really hadn't seen since, dare I say it, Beast Machines. How you have like
Hmm.
the more like techno organic aspect of it, but I'm like, no, I like how it's, like I said before, I like how it's more varied and it's not quite like the desolate hexagonal, like dark colors
Hmm.
we used to be seeing. It was a good fresh take on it, and I liked it a lot more
Yeah.
than going to from the previews.
No, 100%. Because before, like you said, it would just be hexagons and just random shapes and mountains. And then when the last night came around, it would just be like, oh, there's grass too, and there's like rocks on Cybertron. And I've always kind of envisioned Cybertron on being a techno-organic world, not to like our extent where there's trees and valleys and everything, but like there's limited shrubbery, there's limited, wildlife going around and kind of just living. Like I've never thought of Cybertron as just being an all metal wasteland because it wouldn't even make sense for a lot of the lore that they come up with. But the whole digging into Cybertron and living inside of Cybertron, essentially, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't I'm not opposed to it, but I just don't understand the kind of like building the towers on top too. It gives me a lot of like Cybertron 2005 Gigantian
Yeah,
vibes, but building from kind of like the ceiling, which would be like the surface of Cybertron down, it kind of doesn't make sense to me. I don't know in how that would benefit their society and just having buildings above you and buildings underneath you.
I mean they're robots. They probably have like some magnetic anti-gravity or whatever. Again, we're getting way into this for a freaking animated Transformers film.
We're
But like,
writing the next movie.
I mean, we could probably do a better job than whoever the writers' room is for the last night. At the very least, it's like, what do you do? Submarine that doesn't transform, where the main character has dinner on it with a love interest? No. Giant robot scrotum? No. Weird, like racist, vaguely, or could potentially be interpreted as racist characters? No. Weird, like connection to medieval England with a magic wizard? No. I think you and I can at least do better than like the bottom tier Transformers movies.
Yeah, 100%.
Um, but I'm happy that this is kind of the direction that, at least from like the critical standpoint and the audience standpoint, that we would see Transformers movies in the future. And like in closing with this whole discussion that we're having right now, I walked away having a good time. I didn't walk away like feeling bummed out or with like a bit of, why not remorse. That's a strong word, but like a sense
I
of just
regretted it.
unfulfillment. That's the best word. Like I didn't with Rise of the Beast, I'm like, okay, this film had some good moments, but like the ending of that film felt like every other single live action Transformers movie where there's this big, overly long battle with an overly long fight with the major villain of the movie. And there's not really a like satisfying end. Like when Optimus ripped out Scourge, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of cool. It's a little bit too much of a callback with Dark of the Moon, where Optimus Prime rips the spine out of the truck villain at the end of it that's on fire. Um, versus with this one, there was like a defeat, but it felt like he really just knocked the wind out of Megatron's sails. Like, you lost. There's
Get
clearly
out of here.
no return. Get out of here. We banish you. Get out. You're done. You crossed the line. And he lives to live fight another day. Like, we didn't see
Yeah,
Megatron die. We didn't see the villain, go away. And like I was saying
rip somebody up.
we would see them again in the future. There was no like
Hmm.
villain of the week except for Sentinel, because we kind of know if the relationship between Prime and Megatron is to continue, Sentinel has to be taken off the chessboard. But yeah, going back to what I said, I thought it was a fun movie. I enjoyed it. I didn't feel a sense of like unfulfillment with it. I'm looking forward to a sequel, and I'm happy that I have a Transformers film that like not only the fandom feels really good about, but critically it's like finally. It only took what 17 years for this to happen, or not, I guess not 17. We'll start from Revenge of the Fallen. So 15. It took 15 years to have a good Transformers movie again.
About Transformers.
Yeah. And then we had I guess Bumblebee, you can say, was like, it was a good film and it got a lot of good critical reception, but it really just felt like a Bumblebee movie and not a Transformers movie.
Mm.
But yeah.
I am looking at the box office
How's it doing
for the weekend, and I know we're holding it to such high praise as fans, and Rotten Tomatoes is, and a lot of critics are. But I mean, on a budget of $75 million, this weekend Transformers only made about $40 million.
Whoa.
So we are not doing too hot at all.
That's disappointing to hear.
That's crushing because
what was Rise of the Beast like?
Rise of the Beast, I believe they had a budget of 200 and change $1 million,
Yeah.
and they only made about 400 million. So including marketing and everything, they kind of just broke even.
It's not bad, but it's not great.
Rise of the Beast gross, yeah, $439.2 million.
That's the thing with this, is we needed this movie to come out like 2014. I feel in some ways this movie's a bit late because so much has been done with age. I think there was a point that people could have forgiven the Transformers franchise for like Revenge of the Fallen. I personally like Dark of the Moon, but I know a lot of people didn't like it. But once, as I said, once Age of Extinction and The Last Night came around, those two films, once you have like a 4 to 5 or 3 to 4 streak of just like bad films, and you have that reputation of, yeah, Transformers movies, it's just, it's sad to see that, because this is genuinely a great film, and I would have at least hoped that the change from like a live action film to an animated one would have done better. And like you were saying earlier, there's a bit of stigma with animation movies where it's like, oh no, it's clearly for kids. And that's what I was worried about with like the tone and hiring some of the actors that they did and treating some of the characters like they did a bit too kid friendly. I think if you would have, this comes back to what I said, I think a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about like animation or 3D animation versus 2D. If you had like a really good dedicated like army of animators working on like an OVA or a film that had like the Gundam animation quality working on something like that, like some of the like Gundam Unicorn or something like that caliber of animation, that would be awesome. 3D, I get it. It's cheaper to make. It's much easier to make with, you have character models that you can like move around with, as opposed to redrawing everything by hand or using animation models and such. But again, I'm a little sad to hear that it's doing not so well at the box office, relatively speaking. That's sad.
Yeah, I do hope that it, I mean, I don't know, because it's like at this point we're kind of like backed into a corner. Is it like, is live action gonna work? Is animation gonna work? I don't know how the studio is gonna interpret this, and we kind of know live action is kind of will be going downhill, especially with the announcement that we're going to be getting a GI Joe crossover movie with Transformers. GI Joe being a property that has not really been successful at the box office, only in like toy sales with the older demographic of fans. So we kind of just we're lucky. It's definitely a privilege to get live action movies now, and to get this animated movie that's been, praised by everyone on the spectrum, really, from low level fans to people like us who are fanatics or critics. It's kind of just hearing bad news from the box office, kind of just, it's kind of a kick in the nuts.
It is. I don't really know what
So
to do about that other than like being on social media, being sort of a free publicity agent for Hasbro and for
be their
Paramount.
white knight basically, which I would hate to refer myself as like, oh look, like I'm promoting this for this big company, but it's like I want good shit like this. I want more like this.
Yes.
And the only way to get more stuff like this is if people watch the movie, and nobody's gonna watch the movie unless they hear other people talking good about it.
We'll talk about this in a future episode, I think relatively soon, about like what we love about Transformers fiction and what separates good from bad. But having something that respects the universe and treats it with, treats it not with kid gloves, but it treats it with the respect that's something that has a dedicated fan base and that has a 4 decade going on 5 decade history with, the reverence, understanding what makes the characters tick, and finally having that translate into not live action on the silver screen is great. But fighting against the reputation that Michael Bay and to a lesser extent Stephen Caple Jr., because even though Rise of the Beast did well, relatively speaking, for a Transformers fan or Transformers film, it was still like what 53% on Rotten Tomatoes, and there's
Yeah,
a lot of like the clunky things from the live action movies with like a little bit of incoherence, a little bit too much like generic bad guy. That when you're doing something like the GI Joe film for the future, I'm reading the Energon universe of the comics. GI Joe, you can only do so much with it to differentiate it as like American military stuff. I don't mean this as an insult to the GI Joe fans. Don't at me. But as someone who's looking from the outside into that franchise, it's like I get it. It was strong in the '80s. It hasn't done a good job of reaching out to people beyond that, '80s, early '90s demo. Because whenever a GI Joe films come out from like theaters, at least with Transformers, there's been some sort of like cross appeal into into other different generations and other different kids, because you and I have obviously grown up with different Transformers series over the years, but we still came back to the same brand. I
hmm
don't know of a GI Joe community within younger fans that can't differentiate itself from like any other military franchise, because it all kind of seems the same to me.
especially with like a toy line or like a fandom based around like U.S. military and going to war and whatever, like et cetera, et cetera. The GI Joe fandom kind of like came from an era of of,
The
of
Cold War.
history where war was like kind of like it was cool. War was cool back then, basically. That's where
It was more
Transformers came
black and
out of.
white, yeah.
Yeah.
And America
So
did a better job waging war, unlike the last my whole lifetime.
yeah, so it's like now wars become more of a sensitive topic and more of like a taboo topic to talk about with kids. So something like that isn't going to survive in like a kid focused market. Transformers has been able to adapt to kind of more than just being about war and two waging factions and trying to kill each other over power or whatever. We've been able to adapt to that, and we've spoken about how Pokemon came and went, and G2 and Beast Wars, and all these examples of Transformers kind of like adapting to the demographic as they got older while appealing to the older fans. GI Joe just hasn't had the opportunity to kind of like adapt out of that kind of war centered lore that they're about.
Oh, they certainly have. They've had the opportunity to do that. They just haven't met the moment. I think, as I was saying, the Energon Universe comics do like a good job to introduce someone like me who just knows GI Joe as being like the army toys for basically the as it started out the male counterpart to Barbie dolls, which
Mm-hmm.
like the original GI Joes were. But when you look at some other franchises that have adapted over the years, like James Bond, like you've had a James Bond that was started out as like the not conniving, the cunning, like charismatic. So I guess you could say conniving from a certain point of view, but like you have the charming, charismatic ladies man. Then you go on to like the more Roger Moore stuff that's campier. Then you have like Pierce
Mm-hmm.
Brosnan, very like 90s, like
I was just about to ask, who's your favorite James Bond actor?
oh, Daniel Craig, 100%.
Oh, I was gonna say Pierce Brosnan.
Pierce Brosnan to me has the best look for James Bond, but I
Hmm.
think if you're in terms of the movies that came out,
Oh yeah, for
Daniel
sure,
Craig
for sure,
easy.
for sure.
Like Pierce Brosnan was my first James Bond because of like
Yo, me too.
with like The World Is Not Enough, Goldeneye,
The one with Halle Berry, that's the one I grew up watching.
Die Another Day. Oh my god,
Oh, that's a good one,
so
bro.
bad,
So good.
so bad, so
What?
awful.
All right, whatever.
Dude,
Transformers podcast. Transformers podcast.
Transformers. My point being with James Bond, you have a franchise like James Bond that adapts over the years, like whether you're talking about the Cold War or you're talking about the War on Terror or you're talking about like some international rogue agent from like the Middle East. It will adapt to whatever the moment is, and like whatever fiction it's going to be, it's always going to be a reflection of the time that it exists in. With Transformers, it did start out in the same way. You had like the very black and white Autobot versus Decepticon, like the Autobots obviously being, close to the Americans, the Decepticons being like an allegory of like the Soviet Union at the time. But that's changed, and you can adapt and play around with that theme because you're not specifically tying it to like one country or another or one ideology or another. And depending upon your audience, you can make it grayer. With G.I. Joe, it's like I wouldn't necessarily say that you can't introduce the themes of war to kids and make it like that. It's just you have to do it in a way that is relevant to the times you're living in. And you also have to have a certain sort of there's no way to say this without being political, so I'm just going to say it anyway. It's not like capital P politics, it's lowercase p politics, but like doing it in a way where the United States, because it's a real American hero, you're tying it to the way that America is behaving in the world right now. And whether you are, conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, whatever your allegiance might be, I think everyone's pretty much on the same page. Like, no one really can trust what the government's doing, and you don't really have that presidential figure, whether it's Biden or Trump or Harris or Obama or whoever, that everyone can like universally say, America, fuck yeah. Because that's the mood with G.I. Joe. And I feel like doing that with a Transformers film, granted, this would be set in the 90s, so maybe that might be a bit different, but you're still playing again, that's what the whole thing with the Transformers G.I. Joe movie doesn't make sense. Because like you're trying to capture a nostalgic movie, but depending on how far in the 90s it is, you're going to get away from that, further and further away from that Cold War mood. So that just makes the whole idea of a Transformers G.I. Joe crossover that much just more like what's going on. Because how
And
much
then
further?
also, is the nostalgia the war at this point? Like, what are you basing
That's what
the
I'm
GI
saying.
Joe nostalgia on? Like,
Because how far is it going to be? Because we had a 7-year gap between Bumblebee and Rise of the Beast, right? Bumblebee was
yeah,
87. So if you do another 7 years from 94, that's 2001. We all know what happened. Being in New York, and me being grown up in Washington, D.C., we all know what happened in 2001.
I don't know what happened in
So,
2001. You should tell me what happened in 2001. Maybe
well,
people don't know.
basically, you know what happens when you're at a friend's house and someone knocks over your Lego set? Imagine that, but like 2,000 times worse.
Somebody knocked over our Lego set. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Some dude with a beard and a big old stick of dynamite did that, but instead of knocking over with your foot, it was a plane. So that's like, it's like, this is our last episode, by the way, guys. I don't know how we got on this on Transformers 1, and we're talking about Transformers movies in general, but like getting
We're
back
talking
to
about the
that.
next Transformers movie.
But that is the next Transformers movie, is the G.I. Joe one. It's like, I don't get what they're going to do with this film. I know Lorenzo is just like throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping it sticks. I'm like, dude, abandon ship with G.I. Joe. Why did you do that at the end of Rise of the Beast? You did not have to do that.
No, we didn't.
You didn't have to do that. Hasbro really wants G.I. Joe to work. G.I. Joe is not going to work in a film. It's just not going to work. Abort ship, abort mission, forget about it, have it as a cool little Easter egg, and move on. I'm okay with Chris Hemsworth being a human in it. I'm okay with him working together with Optimus Prime, just not as G.I. Joe. Abort ship. Goodness. We spent way too long talking about that, but you can tell that like have no idea what they're going to do with this G.I. Joe movie. I'm so frustrated with it.
Yeah, The only thing that's keeping me hyped for it is the fact that we get another live action Transformer movie.
Yeah. Which
That's it.
if they do want to link the Bayverse with the Nightverse or whatever, I would be okay with Prime being a long nose truck this time instead of just the flat nose, because I feel
Or
that's
give
the
me a
direction they're going.
G2 design. That'd be sick.
Right, like because that would be like, yeah, he's a flat nose, he has the hot rod flames, and it's like a merger between his Rise of
Yes.
the Beast design that's still has G1 cues, but he's starting to get a little bit of like the Bayverse aesthetic. Like he has the shoulder plates, he has that like, more beefy power builder look to him. His helmet's starting to look more like it did.
Mm-hmm.
But again, not full 2007, but starting to get in that direction. But that's just
And Megatron. Give me my Megatron in the next live action movie. I don't want anything happening to like I don't want to live in a world where I don't get to see Frank Welker and Peter Cullen duke it out as Megatron and Optimus Prime and their new designs in the next movie. I
I
need
would
to see it in the next movie.
I would be okay with like not cameos, but like appearances with Megatron with him not necessarily being the big bad, but they're building up to him. What I would love to see is like if they're not going to do Megatron,
Mm-hmm.
have a villain that sticks around for a bit, like Bludgeon or Tarn, or like a big story Decepticon whose mission is to like prepare
Like
for Megatron.
Straxus or something.
Exactly, something like that, or like a
Don't give a
council.
stupid Scourge, bro. Scourge sucked.
Scourge was fine. The concept of Scourge was fine. Like I liked the way
But
he
he sucked.
looked, but yeah, but the actual execution of him as a character was bad.
Yeah, who is this guy? Like, this is not the route that they should have. Oh my god, this is a Transformers One episode.
Well, at this point, at this
Yo,
point, we've milked the Transformers One discussion as much as we can. We are now in the future of the film. We'll subtitle this Transformers One / Future of the Movies.
Transformers One in lowercase, and then future the movies all uppercase in
Yeah,
bold. But yeah, who even was Scourge, bro? This is some Tarn
not
TF
even
two thousand
Tarn.
one Scourge slash Scourge from G1 slash Herald of Unicrons is supposed to be that Scourge? Is it Galvatron? Like, what role is he supposed to be? But he has a mask like Tarn. Like, bro, what is this?
Again, as a different character with better character development, that would have been cool. I love the design. I just hated how like deadpan he sounded all the time, even when he was in pain.
Mm-hmm. Also, if Lorenzo wanted to just commit, you should have just made this Bayverse Prime.
What do you mean, Baber's Prime?
Like when Mirage kicks him in the face, and whatever Phantom of the Opera happens, and the mask comes off, and they build up the reveal of who he like or what he looks like, and it's like, who is this guy? Like, the reveal makes it seem like we're supposed to know who he is.
Right.
Should have just.
I'm totally
Mhm.
against that. I would have not wanted him to be Baver's Prime. That would have been dumb.
I
That
would
would
have been
have been dumb.
like, because the reboot would have made sense. Because it's like, okay, time and space. Okay, transwarp key. Okay, got that. The Peanut, shut up. I know he's just as passionate about it as me. Go away. But then Transformers Five, Unicron. Maybe you could maybe in a flashback in Rise of the Beast, he could have been like, oh, we couldn't stop Unicron, and he got me because I was a Prime, and I became one of his heralds. So now we're trying to destroy like all the Primes in every universe, and Rise of the Beast Optimus stops Bayverse Optimus once he became a herald for Unicron. Because I thought I thought that's the route that they were going to take, especially with like kind of similar design, similar builds, the smokestacks on the back of Scourge, and just a lot of things led me to believe that that's what was going to happen.
That's what these movies do. They have like really good build up and they just fall apart. Unlike TF1. TF1 did not fall apart. TF1 had the landing, they had the momentum. They didn't like overly wow or like really just throw everything all at once in the beginning. It was paced very well. To wrap up the episode on TF1, just bring it back there. From beginning
Mhm.
to end, I really didn't other than like the nitpicking with the quintessons and a couple of like minor things that I have about the whole universe, I liked the overall consistency with it. It is
Mhm.
probably the most, even considering like Transformers 2007 and the 86 film, to date, in my opinion, from beginning to end, the most consistent Transformers film. I felt like I could pay attention to the whole thing. I didn't feel bored. I wasn't feeling like, oh my God, when's this movie over? The 2 hour runtime, or roughly 2 hour runtime, was perfect. I don't really like films that are over 2 hours anyway, unless you're really justifying that extra 15 minutes to wrap up a story or battle scene or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and that's just, it was great. It was coherent. It was cogent. Perfect amount of time. Not too long. Not too short. It just felt like the most. It was the most enjoyable experience overall watching a Transformers movie that I've had in a very long time. Like I said, since TF 2007, and for that alone, I would be more than happy to see Josh Cooley back in the director's chair. I want to see more of this universe. I want to see a little bit more action at the box office. So if y'all want to see the movie a second time, or a third time, or a fourth time, bring your friends, bring your girlfriend, bring your grandpa, grandma, that neighbor that you're trying to hit on. Good date night. Get yourself some popcorn buckets.
Yeah.
And have yourself a ball. But like, guys, if you have not seen this film, number one, why you listen to this episode? We spoiled like most of the good parts for you, along with like a long ass rant on GI Joe and James Bond. But this is what matters for this franchise. If you like this franchise, stop armchairing it, go to the theater, and actually support the franchise. Like, I get it. I have the Steelbook on pre-order. That Steelbook case looks hella nice. Have you seen that?
No, let me search that up real quick.
It's
What,
on
the
Amazon.
steelbook for TF1?
Yeah, it's the 4K Blu-ray
Yo,
Ultra DVD or whatever.
kind of kind of a stupid move to start advertising when you're going to be able to get the Blu-ray
I mean, revenue is revenue.
as the movie's out.
Revenue is revenue. Like that's all that home box or the home box office. That's HBO. All that home media is gonna. It's still sales. It's still gonna
Ooh.
pump it up.
Yeah, but that's not box office though. So I don't know if they take that into account. I don't know how that works. Oh,
I
it looks
imagine.
nice. I like it.
I imagine somewhat. I'm definitely getting that. That steel. I'm not usually a big steelbook case guy, but that looks gorgeous.
You're looking at the one that's kind of like a
It,
retro type, right?
yes,
Reminds me of the '86 movie.
it's Optimus opening the Matrix, and it's like all the like
Yeah,
vintage like '80s arcade colors and whatnot. But yeah,
yeah, it looks
but my
good.
point being, guys, go see this film. Like jokes aside, sarcasm aside,
Hmm.
Danny and I's like millennial Gen Z back and forth battle of the generations things aside, this film's important. We're really at a point in our franchise where this is going to determine whether we're going to, number one, have more Transformers films, and number two, if they're going to be made with respect and care for the franchise for this to keep going. Because otherwise, Grand Poobah Lorenzo is going to be like, you know what we need? My Little Pony with Transformers. That is going to save the franchise, and then we're totally done. Once the bronies come on board, we're done. But
Or we could just end up like Power Rangers and just get fucking nothing for years.
that's another conversation. I'm not as like super big Power Rangers fans.
No, me neither.
I'm more in it for the Megazords, if anything else. I do have a couple of those like mini plus on pre-order for
Mm,
the year from one series. I'm not going to go full auto on that. But anyway, yeah, please see this film. If you haven't seen it, go see it.
go watch it.
Seen it. I think it's worth a second watch. I'll probably go see it again at some point.
Watch it a
Once I
third
get
time.
time. But this film is good. Danny, wrapping up, how if you had to rate this film, what would you give it?
I gave it an 8.5, leaning towards 9, depending on the mood I'm in.
Yeah,
It was just that good. Bringing things from almost every continuity to kind of like merge into a character. Just taking character traits from this place or taking character traits from this obscure media. Just putting it all together made such a great movie.
yes, I agree. I think you can wrap it up there. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
we'll be talking a little bit more on that. Well, one more thing it's still TF1 related. Studio series figures that are coming out. Like you said, Sentinel Prime looks great. Megatron will be out soon. I got Optimus. I quite like him. Alita 1 and Bumblebee will be released next year.
Yeah.
Hoping we might see some more figures on that. But in the meantime,
Mhm.
one more time, go see Transformers 1. It's good. I promise. Danny promises. And if you don't
Everybody
like it,
promises.
yeah. If you don't like it, something's wrong with you.
Yeah,
So
I was gonna say we'll refund you, but no, I don't think
no,
we're
no,
on
no,
that
no,
budget yet.
no,
No.
no, not really. Like once Danny gets his own OnlyFans account up there, like once he gets some coin out there, like if I'll put it this way,
I'm gonna
if
use it to go watch it a couple more times.
if Transformers 1 surpasses 80 million at the box office, on his OnlyFans page, Danny will show you his feet pics. We promise you.
180 million.
180. Like if you want to see the
180.
upside, that's the $90 million threshold. But I think on that note, we're gonna wrap it up here, guys. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Thanks for indulging in all this. Go see the film. We'll see you all next time. Any parting words for the people, Danny?
Yeah, let us know what you thought of the movie. Let us know how many times you're gonna watch the movie. Let us know what you hated about the movie. We want to know more opinions about this. I mean, it's still pretty fresh. A lot of people haven't seen it. A lot of people, work and can have kids. So just let us know whenever you see this.
Ditto. See you guys.
All right, bye bye.